Nexus Weekly. This is our weekly email that lets everyone in on what is going on at Nexus. If you would like to be on the mailing list, sign up on the table in the foyer. New in the Nexus Weekly. The 7 Practices weekly review each week in the Nexus Weekly. We will follow up the teaching from the previous Sunday with a brief review of key points and or resources that will help us all pursue that practice in the practical way. Pub Theology. This Tuesday, April 25th, we will continue our 7-week discussion of the Nexus Practices. Brad will be teaching on one of these practices each week, and we will then follow up each Tuesday at Pub Theology. This promises to be an invigorating and meaningful discussion as we move forward at Nexus. This week, we will discuss walking the path imaginatively. We're going to ask you to engage your creative side. We believe that the human imagination and capacity to create is not incidental to what it means to be human. We will continue to meet at Descendants Beer and Beverage Company on Victoria Street Tuesday evenings from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Have you missed any of Brad's Sunday teachings at Nexus? To watch or listen to the teachings, click on the links in the Nexus Weekly. The Nexus Wine Tour will be held on Saturday, May 6th. Mark your calendars. This is going to be a fun day. Cost will be $40 per person. We recognize that for some folks in our Nexus community, this sort of event may be outside of what they can afford. We strive to be as accessible as we can be at Nexus. So in that spirit, please let us know if you'd like to attend and cost is an issue. We have the ability to help cover costs for those in the community who might otherwise be excluded. Please feel free to contact Murray Baker or Warren Griffin if we can help. Thanks for listening and have a great day.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming down. That was awesome. Are you sure more of you don't want to come down? No, you don't. That doesn't surprise me. Practice number 4 here at Nexus. We want to walk the Christian path together imaginatively by engaging our creative sides. And I'm hoping that you'll hold on to that card you're all given on your way in and think about what your responses might be during the teaching this morning. But the moment you start talking about creativity, for some people, the moment it's mentioned, it feels like checkout time. All right, I'm done. We think to ourselves, well, I'm not creative. I don't get art. I prefer practical things. And if you're going to ask me, Brad, this morning to become an artist, a musician, a writer, you can forget about it. That's not my thing. Fair enough. I promise you this morning I'm not going to ask you to do any of those things or be any of those things. But we are, here at Nexus, going to ask you to engage your creative side. Because here's what I'm convinced of. Every single person in this room is creative. Every single person in this room, I fundamentally believe, has something inside of them waiting to be birthed. And it's that thing that we want to encourage all of us to get in touch with. And for some, that will be painting, poetry, music. For others, that's going to look vastly different. But I truly believe each of us is creative and called to bring to life some kind of creative work. And if you really don't think you are creative, I want to prove it to you right now that you are creative. How many of you ever have lied on the spot? Welcome to the creative world. Do you realize how incredibly creative it is to lie on the spot? It is one of the most creative things you could do. You are basically a fiction storyteller when you lie on the spot. This week, my son Huxley, he was trying to Easter bunny chocolate stuff, and so I caught him in the kitchen. He had pulled the chair up and was trying to reach up to the chocolate. I caught him. Hey, what are you doing? He said, he went into this big story. Well, Mom said if I could find a chair and drag it over, and this elaborate plot, and I was torn between both wanting to praise him for his creativity, his creative lie, but also going, buddy, I know that's not true. I think about storytelling. Every single day, or almost every single day. We come home, we tell somebody a story. And the act of storytelling is incredibly creative. Or think about if you go home today and somebody says to you, what happened at Nexus this morning? You immediately go into creative mode because you can't recap absolutely everything that happened. Immediately you will go into edit mode. All right, I'm going to include the part where I couldn't clap. I'm going to tell this person about I couldn't clap along. And then there was some tables. You're going to go into edit mode and create and craft a story. That is creative. All of us are creative. In fact, I would say storytelling is the universal creative art. In fact, the only difference I would say between each of us and our favorite authors or filmmakers is they have honed their craft very, very well. But being creative, making beautiful things is common to what it means to be human. And this is why I find the Anasazi so compelling. Beyond, if you've been following the series, beyond the mystery of what happened to them, beyond the lure of violence in their dramatic cliff dwellings, beyond all of that, what I find captivating about them is what they left behind. Their art and beautiful, beautiful relics. Take a look at some of these. These are pottery that has been discovered in their site. Some of them refurbished more than others. The top right one is available on eBay for $900, and there's this huge controversy in the archaeological world going, that's stealing, you should never take something from a site and sell it, but that top one's from eBay there. All of these are their pottery, and what I find absolutely remarkable about that is that here are these people taking an everyday thing, a water jar, a seed jar, took the mundane, the domestic, the daily, and made it more beautiful. Or consider this next photo. This is what archaeologists refer to as the Anasazi graffiti wall. They believe this was a huge hangout spot for the Anasazi, and so they would come together, hang out here, it seems, and everyone would add their little piece of art. And so this morning, what's going on down here is us contributing and doing what humans have done for thousands of years, getting together and creating art together. Or sometimes the Anasazi, I wish I could put these all up big screen, but they would commission, it seems, these massive panels of art on the rocks that have lasted for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. These massive, massive mural paintings on the faces of rocks. And then finally, they left behind a lot of this, handprints. And I find these handprints from these ancient people eerie but gorgeous. It's like a little symbol, a little creation of art that simply is a testament to I was here. I existed. You know, rock art appears all over the world. It isn't unique to the Anasazi, but I love their work because it speaks to something universal. There seems to be this inherent drive in humans to create. And whether it's making the ordinary more beautiful or simply marking our presence, there's an inherent drive in us as humans. We want to tell stories, to mark a spot, commemorate a spiritual experience, or simply to announce, I was here, I existed. We're hardwired to create. In fact, I think you could say that human imagination and capacity to create, this is hilarious, Elsa said these exact words this morning. She did a better job than me. The human imagination, capacity to create is not incidental to what it means to be human. It's part of our makeup. It's in our genes. It's a divine mandate. I think it's part of what it means to be authentically human. Take the Genesis creation stories. I find them fascinating. If you notice the very first tasks that humans are given, it speaks to the creative process. And it's fascinating to me. Scripture opens, the very first thing we learn about God is that God is creative, a creator, and the very first thing he tasks humans with doing is creating. This is what we read in Genesis 1, 27, 28. God created humankind in his own image. In the image of God he created. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. The first two mandates given to human beings, if you can get past a static literal reading that this is beyond having kids and farming, there's something deeper here. It's a creation mandate that's powerful. Be fruitful and increase in number. What does that mean? Take what you have, multiply it, expand it, birth something from it, take it and grow it. Subdue the earth. Take the material world around you and organize it. Bring order to the chaos. Or consider there's a second creation narrative in Genesis chapter 2. The very first task God gives Adam is this. Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals, all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. Adam's first task is to name the animals. In other words, his task is to name the nameless. He's to give names to those things that are hard to describe. And so the very first thing we learned about humanity in Scripture is we're called to join God in the creative process. Our divine mandate, you could say, is simply these three things: to multiply, expand, birth, bring life. It's to bring order and beauty where there is chaos. It's to give words and expressions to those things that are nameless. Let me speak to each of those briefly. First, our call to creativity is about birthing, multiply, expand, bring life. What does it mean to be fruitful and multiply? I think we've already fulfilled, we got 7 billion people, we've taken care of the whole children thing. So I think there's something more important here. It's to take what we have and simply do something with it. Have you ever heard someone refer to something as their baby? I was in the chiropractor office the other day, and I always find it's really hard to make small talk with a chiropractor, especially when they're about to crack your neck. And what I really want to say is, please don't kill me. This feels a lot like Van Damme. So he's working on my neck, about to crack it, and I'd run out of things, weather, stuff like that. So I said, I've noticed that chiropractor tables are interesting, and I simply said to him, this table's kind of cool. It seems to do a lot of things. And he says, yeah, it's my baby. My baby. Fascinating. Have you ever heard a musician refer to an instrument as their baby? Or have you ever talked to an entrepreneur about the business that they made and have them say something like, oh, it's my baby. I made this. Or I was talking to a friend works at the university, and they were talking about this project they had made. And I was so fascinated by the words they used. Oh, I made this project, this campaign at the university. It's my baby. Oh, I love it. You see, what we're getting at with that is we create these things and they come to take on a life of their own. For the chiropractor, it's this table's my baby because I bring life here. People come in with sore bones and I breathe life back into it. For the musician, they take their instrument, they create life out of it. Creativity is not just for the artist, though they do have a specific and unique role. We'll talk about it in a second. Creativity is about taking what we have, whether it's an idea, a skill, a talent, a resource, some knowledge, whatever it is we have, and then it's asking ourselves this: can I take this and make some life out of it? Can I use this and create something out of this that takes on a life of its own? It's about taking what you have and birthing something beyond you. And so the call to create this morning, I think, for each of us is this: what do you have? What do you have? You've all got something. Figure out what you have, and then the question is, what can you do to bring life with it? How can you expand that, multiply on that, birth something from it? Or the second creation mandate in Genesis is about subduing the earth, which makes a lot of sense in an agrarian culture, right? You've got to make food, you've got to plant some crops, so you have to subdue the weeds and all that stuff. But today, the call is much bigger than that. What does this mean for us? It means to bring order where there is chaos. To be creative is to organize. And the reality is this: I don't think we give enough credit to those among us who organize things really, really well. Because what they do is a work of art, and it's highly, highly creative. To organize is to bring beauty and order where there is chaos. My neighborhood runs every year a kids' soccer camp for neighborhood kids 4 to 10-year-old. And they asked me to help organize this year. I said, not a chance. I want no part of that. That sounds awful. We had Zoe in it last year, and it was like herding cats. There's just 200 kids running around. It's chaos, and it's ugly, and it's exhausting and draining. And this year, hey, would you help us organize it? That's not my bag. But what I've come to think is this: If you have the gift of organizing a sports league and somehow making order out of 200 kids running around, if you can keep that organized, what you might have created might be more beautiful than the Mona Lisa. I mean, creative people, what you do is you make things gorgeous. And we never give you enough credit because some things organized well are just beautiful. And we all benefit from it, right? And the interesting thing to me is this: organizers actually do the exact kind of work that fine artists do. I mean, consider a musician. Consider what our musicians were doing up here this morning. They take the chaos of musical notes and they organize them in beautiful ways. The painter takes the chaos of color, all these colors, and they organize them in a beautiful way. The poet takes the chaos of words and organizes them in a beautiful way. It's all the same creative work, whether you're coding, working with numbers, working with children. If you organize stuff, you're taking chaos and making it beautiful. And finally, we create by naming. What I love about this story with Adam is if you can imagine yourself in that scenario, you have all these animals, nobody knows what to call them. It's just a bunch of experiences that nobody knows how to describe, and God gives him the task: name them, name them. There's a type of creativity that sole purpose is to give a name to the nameless. And I think all of us know exactly what I'm talking about here. Have you ever heard a song, and as it's playing in that moment, you think, oh, that captured something. That right there is me. Remember in the 90s when Everybody Hurts by REM came out, right? Everyone who's sad suddenly had a song. It's like, it's a song. Have you ever find yourself crying to a song and going, I have no idea what this is about, but it named something? Or those of you who sort of read, have you ever had an author, a poet, a storyteller, a pastor, a teacher? Have you ever been listening or reading something and all of a sudden just a light goes on and you go, yes, that's exactly what I've been feeling. And this author, storyteller, poet, they just described it, they named it, that I was thinking these things and it was chaotic in my head, and this author just put it into words. For our fine artists here, our musicians, our poets, those working with paint, I honestly believe this: that is your task, to name, give a name to the multiple experiences we have as humans. And so the work of creativity goes out to all of us. The question is this: what will you create? And each of you have a card, and I want to push this. I would love for you to take time and think about, what are you going to create? Is there something inside of you waiting to be birthed? Are you called to make the world beautiful by organizing it for us? Are you called to name and express something for the benefit of us all? It's all a holy and sacred work. It's something that I want to call all of us here to, because I don't think it's incidental to what it means to be human. It's fundamental to engage your creative side. Dive into it as a sacred mandate. But doing this requires risk. And it means getting past the voices of shame we all encounter. I can't tell you, I'm too embarrassed to tell you how many creative projects I have in my head that I don't ever get around to, and the main reason I don't is because the voices in my head keep telling me, that's ridiculous, that's a silly idea, you're not good enough to do that. Shame, shame, shame. Whenever we create, it's a risk. And so for many of us, the challenge is not whether we can create something. Of course we can. The challenge is that there are these voices telling us, that's excessive. What you're doing is a waste. Nobody has that kind of time. That's silly. That's not worth pursuing. Consider this story in the Gospels. I love it. It's one of the only stories that appears in all four Gospels. It's about a woman who crashes a dinner party to anoint Jesus. Notice the risk she takes and the shame she faces here. While Jesus was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? Could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. Unbelievable. Notice this. She takes this massive risk. She's like, I've got this beautiful thing I want to do. She takes this risk, walks into the room, and what happens? She's shamed for it. That's so excessive. What a waste. Voices around the table screaming at her. That's ridiculous. So excessive. But then the words of Jesus, and I love them. Leave her alone. Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? And then this, she has done a beautiful thing for me. And I love that line. A beautiful thing. She didn't do a good thing. She didn't do a justice thing. She didn't do a religious thing. No. A beautiful thing. A creative, artistic, beautiful thing. She took a risk. She faced the shame and did something that was creative and beautiful. Anytime you're going to create, it's going to require risk, and you're going to face shaming, possibly from others, but much more likely what you're going to face is the shaming inside your own head. This is silly. I can't do this. This is excessive, a waste of time. Words of Jesus. Leave her alone. She's done a beautiful thing. Practice number 4 here at Nexus is this. We want to ask all of us to engage our creative sides. Paint, music, poetry, words, organizing, it doesn't matter what it is. We're going to ask you continually here to birth something, to organize something, to make something, name something. We want to lean into asking all of us to take the risk of doing something beautiful, to take the risk of living a beautiful life. So I hope you'll be thinking this morning about your cards, and I'm going to ask Caroline to come now and share a reflection on her own creative journey, and then we'll carry along. John and Chris will come. John's going to share a reflection, but I hope you'll take that card and be thinking on that. What are you going to create? Caroline?
I spend a lot of time in my head shutting down that voice that tells me that I'm not good enough, not talented enough, not creative enough. If only I'd practiced more, if only I tried harder, if only. My traveling companion these last 10 years, this voice taunts me and mocks me and often controls me. And sometimes it wins, and sometimes I win. But all I wish is to be free from this question of winning or losing, to be free to create without fear or consequences. In Walking on Water, which is one of my favorite books of all time, Madeleine L'Engle says, "But unless we are creators, we are not fully alive." What do I mean by creators? Not only artists whose acts of creation are the obvious ones of working with paint or clay or words. Creativity is a way of living life, no matter our vocation or how we earn our living. Creativity is not limited to the arts or having some kind of important career. The discipline of creation, be it to paint, compose, write, is an effort towards wholeness. 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 What does that even look like? In Scripture, God is first presented to us as a creator. Some people find comfort in thinking of God as Father or God as Mother, God as Protector or God as Provider. But I find comfort in thinking of God as an artist. Have you ever listened to an artist talk about something that they've made? Their affection and love is so clearly evident. Each note or word or brushstroke is considered with so much care and attention. The artist pours their heart into their creation, and then they share their heart with the world, opening themselves to others' comments and criticism. This is the God that I love, the God of painted sunsets and sculpted mountain peaks, of tinkling brooks and whistling wind, the God who poured his love into this creation and who made himself vulnerable and opened his heart to us. And as individuals made in God's image, we are also creators. It is part of our human nature. And the value of our creativity is not based on the final outcome, but inherent in the practice of making. of using our hands and hearts and minds as one. And when we create, we become a truer and more authentic version of ourselves, of who we were created to be. In our culture of go, 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 where our status seems to be defined by how busy we are and how much we are able to accomplish in a day, to sit and create a piece of art is challenging and counterintuitive. But it is necessary. We must allow ourselves the space and time to create. I know that for myself, it is in this space that I am best able to engage my deepest thoughts and feelings, work through pain, celebrate joys, and be present. It is in this space that I am the most me. And yet, I still struggle to make that space and time. It's just so hard. Considering my longing for wholeness, you'd think I would spend as much time as possible in creative pursuits. And yet, that voice is just so hard to silence. What's the point of creating or practicing if the final result is not perfect? What's the point if other people aren't going to like it? You're wasting precious time that could be spent doing something else on your to-do list. I'm lucky enough to have a job where I teach music to children. I get to see the results of their creative process and am invited on their journey. There's nothing like seeing the joy in a child's face when they're given the freedom to improvise and create something on their own. They pour themselves into that little tune. They pour themselves into the process with little concern for how I or others receive it. They're simply creating. It doesn't matter if it sounds good. What matters to them is that they made it. And that is what I want for my life, to lean into my creative self, to make for the sake of making, to be free from self-doubt, to put forward the effort towards wholeness. Because it is in this space that I am the most authentic, and it is in this space that I meet God.
All right. So, this morning I'm going to talk to you a little bit about creativity as well in my life. And one of the things that's always piqued my curiosity about Nexus is the way this community embraces creativity and expression. And as Brad and Caroline have said already this morning, I truly believe that we all have a creative impulse and that our best inspiration comes from living our everyday, ordinary lives. So, take for example the first song I ever wrote on guitar. I'm going to play it for you today. And not because I think it's really meaningful or an example of creative prowess, but more as an example of something I made years ago and still enjoy playing to this day. And for me, that's kind of the true marker for my own personal creative value is, do I still enjoy this thing I made 10 years later? So a little bit of background about the song. I studied music in university, and specifically composition. And I spent a lot of time trying to write all kinds of different music. Choral pieces, instrumental piano pieces, jazz arrangements. All the stuff I wrote at that time, a lot of it I don't even remember anymore. Probably the piece that I remember most is this little guitar song, which I wasn't even studying. I just picked up the guitar, was doing it for fun, would pull it around campfires, and strangely enough, most of the songs I've written are on guitar. And I think there might be a good reason for that. So with this first guitar song that I ever wrote, there's a specific story that goes with it. And I think it might help to illustrate kind of what I'm going for here. So in one of my philosophy classes, there was a very beautiful girl who I kind of daydreamed about whenever we were in class. And lo and behold, one day after class, she approached me and she said she agreed with one of my comments I made in class. I have no idea what it was I said, but it must have been very impressive. Anyways, long story short, I took this to mean she very likely wanted to marry me and have my children, which may have been a slight misread. But I summed up my courage and I asked her out, and she cautiously agreed to it because she's definitely out of my league. And so I was absolutely elated. And I ran home and I proceeded to spontaneously write this song on the guitar. And it was just kind of a joyful and happy expression, something I didn't really have a lot of at the time, and I think that's why I've always kind of liked it. Anyways, so when I went on a date with this girl, I performed the song live. I thought it was a great idea. But I got so nervous before I went out, I started drinking beer to try and calm myself down. So that was a really bad idea. And by the time I got on stage, my fingers were a little numb, and I was pretty sure I was half in the bag. So I knew the date was failing, and I bombed before I even started. And the reason I share this embarrassing story with you is because out of all that, I ended up with a little song that was meaningful to me. And that is until I began to burden it with all kinds of additional expectations and measurements. And I think too often we let our own expectations creep in. And that's what happened when I tried to play my song on this date. And now it's all about how will she perceive this song? Will I play it well? Is this actually done? Yes. But it's the same sort of reasons that I've been always like other compositions I've made. Oftentimes what I was trying to do was create a response, or a reaction, or a controlled experience. And I feel like expectations kind of crush our creativity, and that's why so often we don't allow ourselves to be creative. We're too worried about how it'll appear and what others will think, and why we're even doing it in the first place. So my suspicion is that there are many places in our lives where we can sort of tap into the sort of freedom I felt when I ran home, all excited that the girl said yes to go out on this date with me, and we can just kind of let our life speak into creative energy and see what happens. So that would be my encouragement: is don't have any expectations. And on a side note, a couple of years later, I met another beautiful girl who's also out of my league, but did marry me. And also, all right, so this song is called "I Got This Funky Feeling." Yes.
I was thinking that was so great, but coming full circle, talking about lies. If I was you, I would have lied and told Sarah I wrote it for her, but that would have been what I would have done. I'm a sinner. I know.
Other songs, but I won't be playing.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we're going to end our morning with another beautiful song, and it's got a really easy chorus. We would love if you would join in and add your voices to the collective mural we've been creating this morning. And when we're done after the song, you can come and check out what some of our brave souls have been doing up here. We would love it if you would leave your card behind, but if you need more time to think about it, that's fine. Take that home. But if you would leave that card behind with something on it, it would be helpful for us all. But I hope that you will take what you've heard this morning and move with that. And maybe it's inspired you to perhaps want to take the risk, move past the shame, and create whatever it is. And I hope that some of our artists have inspired you this morning. But why don't we close with, this is Guiding Light by Foy Vance.